of what they were observing. There were people that had chains around their waists, ankles, and wrists. They were held for hours and hours at a time. Some of them reporting to be held for 9 hours with zero explanation before they were moved. They were initially kept in 72-person cells. I want you to imagine a crowded American classroom and then double or triple the amount of people that you're imagining packed into there. And that's how they were detained in 72-person cells. They were intentionally kept cold. They were wrapping themselves and each other in towels. The mattresses were moldy. They were told that in order to get water, that they had to kneel down and lick the floor. There are people being said that they were shoved and physically assaulted, including a pregnant woman. Okay. The list goes on and on. We can visualize what's happening. And again, unfortunately, we know the conditions with which some of these people have been detained because we've been reading about this in other detention facilities, particularly with immigrants from Mexico and other South American and Latin American locations, right? So we know we can imagine what's been happening because they have been sharing it. These detainees, those who have been fortunate enough to be able to speak to counsel or come public or be released, they've been sharing what's going on. Okay, so let's get rid of some myths and let's talk about why this story we think has a lasting impact. The situation with ICE is ongoing. We are seeing that the immigrants who have already been detained are negatively, not only is it a human rights abuse, not only is it wreaking havoc, fear, and trauma in community and after community across the country, but we're also seeing, like, lo and behold, when you arrest people that do jobs and work, the jobs don't get done. So we're starting to see photos and videos and retellings of crops that aren't getting picked, restaurants that are having to shut down, all kinds of different economic impact. But this one is a pretty large, singular, specific economic impact because now you have hundreds of people from South Korea who are detailing these abuses, and it just escalated. Today, the story broke it domestically, but it broke yesterday in South Korea, that South Korea will launch a full-scale investigation into the legality and arrests and the human rights conditions surrounding the detention of 317 Korean workers. That just broke yesterday. So here's what we understand. They got them home. They were like, hey, is everyone okay physically? Getting them checked out. People are trying to understand what happened. Keep in mind, for many people, English is a second language, if at all, for a number of these individuals. So they're trying to figure out, like, were we under arrest? Are we allowed to go home? What are we being charged with? And keep in mind that many of these people had visas. They offered to get their passports and show them. They offered to show paperwork and ID, and they were denied that opportunity. They were all treated the same, regardless of what paperwork they may or may not have had on their person. So this is not a question of them violating any laws, though that does not give rights to be abused, right? So you have this going on, and what apparently happened is that when they got into the country, everyone's trying to figure out what the heck happened. They were putting them in interview rooms as a group. The South Koreans who were detained and their families were allowed to come in large groups. And the South Korean government was trying to piece together what happened from a very trauma-centric, chaotic perspective. Well, now it's been almost a couple of weeks, and they're starting to go back and individually interview them. And the companies, including Hyundai, are cooperating fully with this. So every single one of the detainees is being told that no matter how long it takes, they will be given the opportunity to share their story with the South Korean government. Every Korean, except for one who had applied for a green card, held a valid work permit. The foreign ministry officials said that they are still trying to negotiate about the future of what happens with not just this plant, but other South Koreans in general. Some South Koreans here on business, not just with Hyundai, but in other corporations, have been advised that they may want to return home. And so right now, they are saying it is necessary that our government will step in and hear their accounts, the people detained, and address any human rights violations that may have occurred. Now, there are working level consultations underway between the foreign ministry, the U.S. embassy, and right now the foreign ministry officials are not saying what they are going to do next in light of these human rights violations. Okay, lots to unpack here. Let's first talk about it from a human rights perspective, and then we're going to talk about it from an economic perspective. So, you have hundreds of people that are swooped up, mistreated, and then it took them days to get them home. They were threatened. There are tell of them being having to sign, some of them, a piece of paper that says they'll never return to the United States, and being told that under gunpoint. The stories keep coming out and they keep getting more horrific as we learn the details. So my first question to all of you is, and so what? And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean literally, any of the attorneys out there, any of you who study social justice and human rights, do you think that this will be a beacon across the globe to say, hey, the United States is no longer safe to travel to, including for business? Or do you think that this will go out with a whimper instead of a bang? Do you believe that these voices of these South Koreans who have the backing of their government, have the assurances from their employer that they will not receive negative repercussions for speaking out, if they have the courage and the ability and the support to speak out, can we make a difference? That is my first question for you. Do you think that the South Koreans that were detained speaking out will make a difference? Do you think it will cause other countries to speak out, and some of the other people who were detained from other countries and other areas that maybe don't have the support of their employer? Do you believe that this will get to someplace like the United Nations or another arbiter, and that the United States will finally be called out for our human rights transgressions? Square foot gardening for you. Again, so good to see you. Hopefully, is what she says. Flower Bell says, yes, it will. It will make an impact. Do no harm, spelled D-U-E. I love that. Says, I hope so. Kelly, I know that you're online as well. I would love to hear what you think about all of this. Kathy McGrath Walcott, good to see you. Kathy says, I believe that it will make a difference. And Cassandra says, I hope so too. So we hope that maybe, now think about where we are as a nation right now. We as citizens are sitting here hoping that someone holds our government accountable. Just surreal times that we're living in when we acknowledge that right now we're living with the bad guys, right? Just a crazy thing. I want us to kind of hold on to this for a second as we think about other nations that either currently or in the past have maybe committed human rights abuses, and we tend to paint everyone with the same broad brush, and we say, well, all people of that nationality are bad, or that country overall and its all of its citizens had it coming. Think about that as we sit here just kind of trapped in 47's regime, and we're not asking for this. We are not in support of that. So might be a little bit of a moment to pause. Jem says maybe they will kick the US troops out. Good point. I'm wondering also what's going to happen with the investment plan. Unsweetened Auntie T says hope is not an action plan. This is true. Hope is not an action plan, but they do seem to be taking action. The South Korean government, when you actually practice justice, or you attempt to, it's not as quick as posting on social media within hours, right? To interview over 300 people properly, assemble that data, cross-reference their stories, gather any documentation or correlation that they can. This could take months. Now, in the meantime, here's my follow-up question for you. Let's pivot to the economy. What does this do economically? In Georgia, they were touting this Hyundai plant as a creator of hundreds, if not thousands, of jobs in the area. And now it's going to be indefinitely delayed at the least. I mean, the United States is now saying, our bad, you can come back, whoopsie, no harm, no foul, right, guys? Sometimes friends just detain and shackle friends in chains. But South Koreans are definitely not buying it. Many of them are saying publicly, I'll never go back. And can you blame them? Again, put yourself in that position where you or a loved one are on a business trip and you hear about this happening. I mean, you would never set foot in that country again, right? So Marlene is saying it was 8,500 jobs on the line. Holy moly. User 9654 is pointing out when you're arrested, you are traumatized. That is so true, user, because I have not been arrested, but I have been detained by police, as you know, social justice tends to get me into a little bit of hijinks. And just that is so traumatizing that it is extremely triggering. And I was not in immediate danger and I was not booked and it was still traumatizing, right? So Square Foot Guardian says if everyone who was unjustly detained sues the United States, the economy would collapse. Elite 23 says, I'm sorry, 33 Ellie says blue states should continue to support them. So you can try to support them as a blue state. I get what you're saying, like try to move the plants to those types of environments. But keep in mind, ICE is going into California, they're going into DC, they're threatening to go into Chicago, they're going into bluer cities like Memphis, right? So it's a federal organization that could come in. Little bit tough to convince people from another country that this is home base and everything is fine when they're seeing on the news that it's absolutely not fine, right? So Sarah's pointing out that the woman who reported them to ICE is a MAGA running for office. If that is not a case of your nose being cut off to spite your face, I don't know what is. Like someone's running for office, trying, supposedly caring about your constituents and wanting to bring jobs in, and then look at the domino effect that was caused, right? User 9654 says, I'm a citizen, but brown. I need to carry my passport and I'm staying home and keeping to myself. I'm really sorry to hear you say that, but I definitely understand it. What I would just say is a couple of things. Number one, make sure you keep copies of your passport with different friends and relatives, because we're hearing tell of people just throwing them and your real ID away. So make sure you have copies and that an attorney. This is for everyone, but particularly if you are someone who does not pass for white, then I would say absolutely you need to double down on this, unfortunately. Make sure you know, who does your family know to call? Have you selected an immigration attorney ahead of time? Where are your papers located? All of that is important. The other thing I would say too is, rather than feel like you need to be a shut-in in your own country, is it safer to travel in groups? We don't know the answer, right? And that's where we are, is trying to keep each other safe, right? Um, but this is where we are. So here, going back to the economic question, we are already seeing unemployment increase and start to tick up. We are seeing inflation start to tick up. We believe that there's going to be more impact from the ridiculous tariff stuff, which we're not even getting into right now. Do we think that other countries are going to be impacted by what happened to South Korea, right? They get the news. They probably, some of them follow the news much closer than some of us do, right? If you're somewhere like Japan or Germany or a number of other countries that invest in infrastructure in the United States, are you taking a step back and saying, maybe not? Are you going to slow things down? Are you going to have trouble recruiting employees that want to come on business trips here, right? So, some of you are bringing up FIFA and the Olympics, and that is such a good point. We've already seen sports teams turned away at the border. How can you have successfully these multicultural global events, and yet you are basically targeting people that don't look a certain way, that are from different countries, that might not speak English as a first language? Whatever your criteria is for being a jerk, how can we welcome these people in? So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. So we're going to keep an eye on this story and in the investigation. We don't expect it to move quickly, but I will tell you, just on a personal note, I was happy to see that South Korea isn't just like, let's let bygones be bygones. They are standing with their people. And you're talking about an economy that probably, needs these deals in a certain way, just as we do. So will they come to some sort of agreement with the United States? Will they do what others have done and start to take their business to Canada, Mexico, or another location? How much of a hit will we take economically from all of this? And will there ever be any action that stands up that breaks this spell, to where people on the MAGA side start to say, hey, wait, maybe some immigration is actually good and we shouldn't torment these people. I don't know. I'm not banking on the learning curve, that's for sure. Um, Kelly pointed out it's Tory Branham who is running for office. So, Kelly, I hadn't committed her name to memory, the woman that was running for office that turned these poor people into ICE. But if anyone on the chat, or Kelly, not to put you on the spot, but if any of you know the person who's running against Tory, do we have a Democratic nominee in that seat? What is the seat? Can we support her opponent? Let's try to talk about some proactive action. So let's see how we are here. So Unsweetened Auntie T says South Korea knows from experience with Japan and comfort women how to support their people. I mean, it's great to see that a country actually supporting its people during this time, and its employees seeing that as well. Okay, lots to talk about tonight, and I want to leave enough time to talk about what the big story is of the week, because we're going to take a little bit of a twist with that. For those of you that are just joining us, you're on Political Fixer Live. We're talking about the top news headlines and stories of the week coming back into our fall season after a summer hiatus. And we are covering not just the stories that we think are dominating the headlines, but also some that we think maybe should be covered a little bit more. And that's definitely the category of this next story that I want to talk about. All right. If you haven't had a chance to read it, there is a story in The Guardian written by Arwa Mandawi. I'm going to spell her name because I think I may have just butchered it, so I apologize for that, Arwa. Arwa is Arwa, and Madawi is Mahdawi. So Arwa Madawi. She wrote a great piece in The Guardian, if you get a chance to check it out, that says, "Women's suffrage is apparently up for debate again in America." Now, we have been talking about this a little, but we're going to be covering it more in the coming weeks. These quiet statements, pieces of legislation, things that scope creep is what we would call it professionally, where women's rights are under a consistent barrage of coordinated attack. And I am not just talking about reproductive rights, though those are critically important. We are not saying that those are not important, those reproductive rights, but they're going for more here. They are going for full second-class citizenship. And for those of you that have not been watching Political Fixer Live, and for those of you that may have forgotten, we do have an initiative to tackle this that we're going to be talking about a lot more in the coming weeks. We've got a few different things happening with Equal Rights Now. You can learn about that at equalrightsnow.us. And this initiative that we've launched with your help is specifically to highlight ways that women in the United States are still second-class citizens and to remedy those. But our bigger picture is to actually secure equal rights in the Constitution, which women do not have. Currently, in our Constitution, a gun has more rights than women do. Our equal rights were never fully secured. So we're going to be talking a lot more about this and bringing this to light from a lot of different perspectives. But today, we're going to talk about voting because there has been a quiet but steadying drumbeat of far-right influencers and people on that side of the spectrum calling for women to lose their right to vote. At first, it started out as, oh, we're just joking. And then it started to get more consistent. And let me tell you the approaches that they're taking. And again, I do want to credit The Guardian and Arwa Madawi for the article, because we're going to cite some of her research in some of this. So she starts off by talking about Braden Sorbo. And if you are thinking, hey, that name sounds vaguely familiar, it's because he is the 24-year-old son of Hercules actor and washed-up loser Kevin Sorbo. Now, he has become a far-right influencer and starting to try to say provocative, that's the kindest way I can think about it, nasty things online. And it's working for him. He's got over 1 million followers. He's on different YouTube shows and podcasts, just living in the pig slop, right? And he said recently, I know more young women today who say they wish they didn't ever get the right to vote. Really? Name one. Find me one. That's not some like a Instagram influencer that's just trying to get clicks for attention. Name an actual woman that's like, man, I wish I didn't have the right to vote. Some of them might not vote. Some of them might say, oh, politics is gross. But I've never met a woman ever that's like, oh, I wish I didn't have the right to vote. But he continues without any pushback on this show. And he says that all of the ills of the world, feminism, can be traced back to the 19th Amendment. Sure. Okay. That's why your dad doesn't have acting work. It's the 19th Amendment. He continues and says that his female peers have said they would give up their right to vote if it meant that 10,000 liberal women wouldn't be allowed to vote so we could return to a better place. You hear that, ladies? Look at the sacrifice they're willing to make to silence us. Good Lord. Okay, so this is where it gets a little bit interesting. He then goes on to cite that it is unchristian for women to vote. Ding, ding, ding. There is a far right, not at all Christian, Christo-fascist maybe, but not at all Christian movement that not only says that women are secondary citizens, that women are put on this earth to serve men, but that wanting more than that and expressing any type of opinion is sinful, that married couples should have one collective vote and that the man should be the one to express as the head of the household. Because if you're not honoring your husband as the only sole voice of that household, then you're not honoring God. Now, this value system has matriculated to far-right churches, private schools, and is all across TradWife Insta as far as the eye can see. And it's not going away anytime soon. That you don't want to be a feminist, not because we're not using the 60s fear tactics of you'll never get a man, you'll never have a fulfilling life. You can either be a feminist or you can be a mother, like all of those scare tactics. No, we're going right to the big one, the big G himself. God wouldn't love you if you're a feminist. And this fringe idea is gathering a lot of steam lately. We're seeing this in so many different ways. Let me just name a couple of big ones that are the big influencers that currently have access inside our government. We always got to talk about Musk because he's just so grody and he finds his way into every unpleasant headline, but this is no exception. He reposted someone that said that a republic of high status males is best for decision making. And he said that is an interesting observation. Because if there's one thing this administration is showing us, it's that incompetent men that just rule on their vibes do a great job. We're just seeing that working out splendidly. We also have Peter Thiel, who is a tech billionaire who's currently getting access to so much of our private data and inserting so much surveillance software into our government right now. He actually is credited with bankrolling J.D. Vance's entire career and making the hillbilly and into the VP. And he said in an essay, this was supposedly a thought out point, that since 1920, the vast increase in welfare beneficiaries and the extension of the franchise to women have rendered the notion of capitalist democracy into an oxymoron, which is a pretentious way of saying that women be taking all of the welfare and causing all of the problems. That's the guy who's right now got his access to the Oval Office, someone who has said a number of times that women should not have access to the right to vote. He's walked it back a couple of times, like, oh, I'm just kidding, you guys misunderstood me. But he said similar things a number of times. And then you've got our lovable drunk U.S. Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth. I almost called him Kegseth because I read that somewhere, but we're just going to let that go. He's gross because he's gross. He's not gross because he's a drunk. It's just fun to make fun of him. Okay, so he shared a video on Twitter saying that where several pastors said that women should no longer be able to vote as individuals because all of Christ for all of life, that the household should be the only one to cast the singular vote. Now, people say awful things. We're going to cover some more of that in just a bit. But this is something that is creeping up again and again and again and again. So why? Let's talk about it. Number one, We'll start with the economy because that tends to be, again, a driving force for a lot of these jerks is cash. And the bottom line is a lot of them subscribe to a scarcity mindset. This idea that if they have, there's less for us. And so this is literal. We're seeing that with these layoffs in the government, particularly that they target not just women, but they also seem to target Black women in particular. These so-called DEI hires tend to target particularly women and women of color, particularly Black women. We've seen that overall the unemployment rate, while it stayed about the same for white men, it ticked up for women and it almost doubled for Black women. So if this idea that if you have as women, then there's less for me to have as a man is an archaic way of thinking, and yet prominent with certain individuals who subscribe to that scarcity, I must conquer ideal. Then there's the inconvenience that while they want to go out there, and I guess what you call what they do conquering, if social media posting is a conquering, um, we have this idea that while they're doing that, we as women should be making their lives easier. We should be raising their children. We should be supporting them emotionally. We should be cooking their meals and cleaning their houses, basically unpaid labor. And there is definitely a movement to go back to this ideal of women being unpaid labor to support these men as they take over with, again, in their righteous place of ruling or whatever you want to say. Median wages for men are still continuing to lay flat, if not slightly increase, but for men, they increased 3.7% the wages, and yet women are not only paid less for the same work, but their wages have gone down in the last quarter. And then there's another ugly turn to this, which is this idea that women are property, that we are literally secondary citizens, that we're just basically mouthy, well kept pets. And that idea, before I solicit your input on all of this, because we're definitely discussing this one, I want to get to one quick aspect of this story that I think was not widely reported. I want to read a quote, and I want you guys to guess out of everyone who said it. Um, they'll do anything they can to find something, things that take place in the home that they call a crime. If a man has a little fight with the wife, they say that this was a crime. Does anyone want to guess who said that? It was said just a couple of weeks ago at a Bible event. It was a meeting at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. It was 47. I see all the peaches. Yes. Good guess, Square Foot Gardening. Good guess for those of you that said Kirk or Vance, but it was 47. So while all of this stuff was happening in the news, while there's so much distraction happening and so much legitimate news that's awful happening, this one kind of flew under the radar. I'm going to read the quote again. So at the Museum of the Bible, which I will admit I did not know existed, then he was giving a speech about how crime is down overall because of whatever made up numbers he's using. And he said, and this is a full quote, and much lesser things, things that take place in the home, they call a crime. They'll do anything they can to find something. If a man has a little fight with the wife, they say this was a crime. Just for some context here, 4 out of every 10 women experiences some sort of physical or sexual violence or stalking by an intimate partner. 1 out of every 4 men does as well. I want to point that out. This is not exclusively a women's issue. It is just a predominantly women's issue in this context. And it makes sense that 47 would be all in favor of just looking the other way. For those of you that might have forgotten or might not be familiar, back in 1990, his now late wife filed a deposition during their divorce. His late ex-wife, forgive me, Ivana, filed a deposition in the divorce. In her sworn divorce deposition in 1990, according to her, Trump, 47, had a scalp reduction operation that he had undergone to eliminate a bald spot that had been unexpectedly painful. And when he felt like she was being dismissive of that, he yanked out a chunk of her hair and attacked her violently. We're going to keep this PG. And then after he attacked her, She spent the rest of the night locked in a bedroom crying, and in the morning he asked her, "Does it hurt?" with menacing casualness. She later did not ever withdraw that statement, but did say during the settlement that she didn't mean the description of the events, which she repeated again in another sworn statement and also to multiple friends outside of the relationship. She said she didn't mean it in the criminal literal sense. And that was right before she received a $14 million divorce settlement and signed away confidentiality. Okay, let's talk about this. So we are seeing a consistent issue with women being diminished, downplayed, etc. Why? We talked about the economic side. What's the other side? Women are not falling for this nonsense. When women vote and they are educated and engaged in politics, these suckers lose their elections. As a result, they are in the process of passing a number of different pieces of legislation to make it harder for women who have changed their names during marriage to vote, make it harder for women on college campuses to vote, and college students in general, but particularly targeting name changes. Asking for additional ID from women, including original birth certificates, right? So, this is again about looking at someone whose minds you cannot change, people that you cannot force to think like you, that you have not been able to successfully brainwash with your podcasts and your far right nonsense, and saying, how can we silence them? We can silence them in the home with guilt, in the church by saying that they are not godly enough if they do speak out against people that or things that they think are wrong. If need be, silence them physically, and don't worry about it. It's not really a crime. Wink, wink, nod, nod. And then to take away their rights, right? So it's a dark look at what they're doing. The good news is a few things. Number one, hey, good job, ladies. They've realized they can't shut us up. If they think that this is something that's necessary, that means they're kind of ceding the battle of ideas, right? If they're saying, hey, this is the only way that we can keep them quiet, then good job to the women out there that are not falling for the nonsense. They're doing the polling, they're seeing the numbers. And guess what? Women are not falling for it, right? I'm not saying every woman. I'm not saying we don't have a lot of work to do. Engagement of women is a top priority, or should be moving forward, because we are considered the more persuadable group of voters. And when women are engaged, 7 out of 10 of them will vote in a more progressive manner. 7 out of 10, just for being engaged, just for understanding what's going on. So, good news, the fact that they're trying to silence us means that we're actually doing a good job of rejecting the violence and the rhetoric and the nonsense and the lies and all of that. Okay, so that's point one. Point two is it's not working what they're trying to do. Women are pushing back. We are staying engaged and informed. So, what can you do? The first thing is continue to grow your communities online, communities like this one. Make sure that you're connecting with each other and staying on top of what's going on, not just from a broad federal sense of who posted what and who said what at a conference, but what laws are going on in your state that you need to be mindful of. What little things are creeping in, right? Different states that are trying to rule out no fault divorce, so you can't leave an unhealthy marriage, states that are changing voter ID restrictions, states that are removing different gender pay gap laws or quietly erasing gender discrimination laws. That can happen at a state level, it can happen at a county level, it could also happen at your place of business. Another thing you can do when we're talking about DEI protections, we definitely want to focus on the LGBTQ community, as well as the Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities and other communities of color. They are getting, and now we're seeing immigrants in particular, the hardest hit in many of the ways. But guess what? It also covers women. And so when stores and companies are talking about getting rid of DEI and rolling back their diversity and inclusion hires and their practices, that means that they are removing safe spaces for women not to be fired, women not to be harassed, women to be taken seriously and paid what they're worth. So you can also fight back with your dollar. Choose who you're going to support. And when you hear DEI, listen, supporting communities of color and the LGBTQ community should be enough for you. But if you need extra incentive to watch where that dollar is going, when you hear DEI, think women as well, because that matters, and they are definitely coming out of that after people with that. Now, user 9654 is saying that there is a blackout September 16th through 20th. Is this a user, like a buyer blackout? If you could give me more information about that, I would love to know. I want to thank Vivian for the different hearts and gifts. I want to pose this question, then we're going to thank some gifters and some great political fixer family members in just a second before we move on. But what are your thoughts on how to push back effectively against this, not so crazy idea of women not having the same rights as men, right? I would argue again that we've been seeing this for quite some time. Unfortunately, discrimination against women is nothing new, but I do think that this is a bold assertion of women should not even have the right to vote. Is this a crisis opportunity for us? Can we use this to show how outrageous their views are? Since voting should be far less divisive theoretically than women's health issues, which can sometimes get to be a little complex in some families and in some areas of faith, right? User 9654 saying an organized movement to not purchase going around on social media. Okay. People are talking about strikes. I know that there's been an effort to try to organize different strikes. I know not everyone can strike, but different companies and unions are talking about forming some strikes definitely in the fall. Canceling subscription, boycotting certain corporations. 33 Ellie is saying, I was shocked when Roe was overturned that U.S. women didn't hit the streets and not leave. I think that this is a hubris, that women think it's not going to impact them. There are certain levels of women that think that that type of protest is unseemly. And there's certain type of women that know that, frankly, they have the means and the ability to just get the care somewhere else, or that their child will never need it, or they would never need it because they would never be engaged in certain things. There's this kind of ignorant bliss that surrounds certain women that think that if they make the right decisions, then they'll never have problems that are impacted. This is someone else's problem, right? It's called blackout the system. Okay, good to know. Hold on, I lost you guys. Okay, there we go. I have to swipe left. I was trying to read the comments and I almost lost you there. Okay. No Kings 2 will be October 18th. Before we get into more of your comments, I want to thank our gifters who are just amazing. I see that we are already at over 43,000 likes. You guys can tell I'm rusty coming back into from the hiatus because I haven't even been following the likes, but already at over 43,000 likes. I want to thank Susie B1, Akui. Is that how you say your name? AAYKUE. Definitely let us know how to say that if you don't mind. Marlene, good to see you. Veronica Kennard, good to see you as well. Divine AF Girl, hello, girl. Kimmy, let's see. Kimmy EETN. I don't know how to say the end of that. Vivian, so good to see you. We've got more fan club members, and we've got fan club members 66 through 69. I want to say hi to Bill C., Kimmy EETN, and Slow Roasted Unicorn. A little dark, but I dig it. I also see some comments from other stories, so we're going to read that. We're going to keep going with this before we pivot. Jen says, I hope South Korea makes a big deal about the human rights violations. Completely agree. User 9654, who's been very busy, welcome user, says, dehumanizing immigrants is the go-to for dictatorship. Such a good point. Let's talk about this situation with women. What are some other ideas that you all have for kind of watching out for this type of behavior and pushing back? We've talked about economic blackout. We have talked about making sure that we support, people that support us, forming communities for each other. I also want to mention that it's time to start talking politics in your social circles, ladies. For those of you who socialize, including men on the live as well, when you socialize with women, there are ways to bring up different political conversations that are not as divisive as some of the ones we're about to cover in just a bit. But see if people are following, see if they have any questions. There are stories like what happened with the Hyundai plant that are not as divisive, that aren't as complicated. and see if they will commit to just following the news and voting in the next election. For some of you, that election is coming up. You've got November elections happening in some key states. Virginia and New Jersey are among them. I think Georgia has some statewide races on some key positions. If you want to follow races, by the way, I don't get paid for this plug, but I have to say it again. Bolts Magazine has been great at covering races across the board. We cite their data constantly on this program. So will they commit to going and voting? Can you start hosting like election week or post-election cocktail parties or events or coffees before people go vote early on the weekends? For those of you that have early voting, what can be done to try to make voting a social activity? One of the reasons that this divisive rhetoric is so successful is not just because it attracts a certain caliber of young man, which we are seeing, as well as a certain kind of sociological profile that does tend to be male. That's one of the reasons that this divisive rhetoric is so effective. But another reason that the divisive rhetoric is so effective is because it drives away the participation of women. There are a lot of women that are like, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to talk about it. Politics is so gross. It's so violent. It's so divisive. I don't like to pay attention to it. And that is a victory for people who depend on low voter turnout. And we're going to be talking about this a lot more moving forward because of the data we received since the 2024 election. That data is shocking, and it points a spotlight on one key demographic. Not to say that every vote doesn't matter, not to say not to talk to men about voting, not at all. But we know that there is one group in particular that can make a huge swing, seismic, in the elections. So how do we turn voting and politics more into a socially acceptable, even possibly positive, fun, and rewarding activity among groups of women, right? I'm afraid people are not paying attention. Even my own sister won't listen. I think that's common. I think people not paying attention is common, and we're going to have to get very creative about how we bring them to the table. But one story that is not going to bring them to the table. All right, we've got 50,000 likes. I'm hoping that you can't take them away because we're about to go into the deep end with our next story, talking about divisive rhetoric. What in the heck has been going on this last week? All right, we're going to tackle the situation with Kirk. I have, as some of you have may noticed, yes, I was on hiatus, but also I made a conscious decision not to post, write, or say anything about what happened with the situation with Kirk. I've got to be mindful of my words because otherwise this broadcast will be cut off like that with certain platforms. So we're going to be mindful with our words. So forgive as I dance around certain language. This has been a week of heroes and cowards. Let me just tell you, we have definitely seen some creative things. Now, I don't really want to talk about the incident itself that much at all. That's not where this target of conversation is going. What I'd like to do is dissect 3 or 4 different groups of people and their response to what happened. And again, the theme of the show is impact. What can we look at moving forward? Why did they react this way? And what can we expect moving forward? All right. So bear with me here. Let's start with the difference in how we saw people respond, either folding into the moment with cowardice or rising to the moment with courage. All right. I'm going to give you 2 quick examples. I'm not just saying this because I'm a Florida State girl, but Clemson is a great example of what not to do. I'm going to read. Clemson has fired, by my count, at least 3 professors already for their response to what happened. And in one of their statements, I'm just going to read one paragraph of one of their statements. We are seeing firings like this all across the country. My latest count when I did a search was no fewer than 40 teachers and professors in various states have been fired or placed on leave because of what's been happening with this issue and their response to it. Okay, so with that in mind, I want to read this Clemson statement when they were defending their position to remove professors for their response to what happened. We stand firmly on the principles of the U.S. Constitution, including the protection of free speech. However, that right does not extend to speech that incites harm or undermines the dignity of others. Clemson posted this without an inch of irony. So I just this is the mind trick that causes me to have to stop and breathe for a second. People are being fired for saying things that, quote, incite harm or undermine the dignity of others about a gentleman whose entire career was about inciting harm and undermining the dignity of others. The mind trick that it plays, right? It's like the context of his life has been completely whitewashed. And instead, we are to toe the line. And who defines the line? The president, the Oval Office, Washington, D.C. They define what it is that we're supposed to feel and how we're supposed to act and what we're supposed to say. And we, as obedient citizens and institutions, if we don't want to lose access, if we don't want to lose funding, if we don't want to be targeted, then we are supposed to hop to and do exactly what is expected of us. It is obedience in advance, and it has been nauseating. And it is across the board. The moments of silence at the Yankees and other professional sports players. Now, listen, I'm not saying I haven't seen all these social posts. I am not defending everything that was said or what have you. That's not the point. The point is we are doing this and having this conversation. And if any of you use Google at all for 5 minutes, you will see some of the outrageous and disgusting things that were said by this individual that do not just vaporize because he is no longer on this earth. It is absolutely hypocritical, but the point of it is to obey in advance, So that's the negative side of what we've seen in coverage, right? Marlene says it's gaslighting. Veronica says, oh, please. I mean, you just have so many more kinder ways to think. Kimmy's like, oh, wow, right? Okay, some people stood up to this in their own way. And this isn't a small way. When you're standing up to a power structure like this, where everyone is telling you that you're wrong. And you're right, it's gaslighting on a national scale, even by a standard of an administration that has lied literally thousands of times. Even for them, this one was a doozy. And we're going to talk about why they did it in just a minute, because that's where it gets interesting. But I do, again, I'm not just saying this because I'm a Seminole, but screw Clemson all the way to the moon. But a local government official in Iowa refused to comply. Now, let me just point out the situation itself, not funny at all. Okay, very serious situation, yes. But having the president of the United States go up there with all of his grandeur and say, and right away, the flags will be flown at half-mast tomorrow. And everyone's like, it's September 10th. Tomorrow is September 11th. They were already going to be flown at half-mast. I don't know if you care at all, which he didn't care about September 11th at all, but if you care, the flags were already going to be flown at half-mast, and then very shortly corrected, I'm just kidding. It's not tomorrow. It's the whole weekend. There you go. Way to nail it. Well, some people pushed back. John Green, the chair of the Johnson County Board of Supervisors in Iowa, said that he would not follow the directive to fly the flags at half-staff through Sunday for the incident that happened. He says, I condemn the killing regardless of who pulled the trigger or why, but I will not grant Johnson County honors to a man who made it his life's mission to denigrate so many of the constituents I have sworn an oath to protect, and who did so much harm, not only to the marginalized, but also to degrade the fabric of our body politic. Now I'm going to say his name again. His name is John Green. It's spelled Jon. And if you want to send Mr. Green some sort of note thanking him for his courage in standing up for his constituents and attempting to do the right thing. He is with the Johnson County Board of Supervisors in Iowa. I don't know how to get him a direct message, but I have a feeling that if you just sent something to anyone at any email address in Johnson County, Iowa, it would find its way to Mr. Green. So I want to say something else that he stated. He said Johnson County's flags will fly as usual, and he added, I will accept any consequence, whether legal or electoral, for my decision. It is mine alone. If I could bottle that courage and give it to about, 50, 60% of the members of our Congress, I would do it. Way to go, Mr. Green. There were other people that stood up, other people who lost their jobs. And again, listen, this isn't about saying who did this. We're not discussing the actual act. This is about being told, ordered, how you are to respond and feel, firstly, and then secondly, ordered to remove any context, memory, or truth regarding the actual telling of the life that this man chose to live. He chose to live that life. Veronica is pointing out that vile things were said about the slain Minnesota elected representative Melissa Hortman. You know, there's so much to be concerned with here as far as the hypocrisy, the gaslighting, the political violence. We could spend a lot of time on that. I know there's a lot of important discussion to be had with that. But what I'd like to do is point out a couple of elements that I think are not being discussed that I want to call your attention to. All right. When we're talking about what happened, why did people respond a certain way? And what can we look for as far as motive moving forward? Because this story is going to move on, right? The story is going to move on. Unfortunately, there will be something new that happens that we're shocked about and we're like, I can't believe this happened. And then 2 weeks later, something else more. That's where we are. That is our awful timeline that we're in. And we are not choosing to actually do anything to remedy the situation. So we can suppose that it is going to continue to occur, right? That's the track that we're on, unless or until behavior changes, legislation changes, policies change. That's not happening anytime soon, as we're seeing. So what can we look at as far as why they're responding this way and what we can do about it? Now, there's a few different things I want to point out. Number one, let's talk about the media response. If ever there was an illustration of corporate media and how we have become just like basically 3 companies and no independent journalistic thought whatsoever is allowed to creep through those crevices, it was this incident. If you saw the cover of the New York Times or the cover of the Washington Post, it wasn't a lead story. It was all of the stories, all of the stories. And it was absolutely just whitewashed nonsense, right? Veronica's saying it was ridiculous, right? Okay. So one takeaway from this is corporate media was exercising, this was an exercise of dominance and control. And anyone who spoke out was fired or removed. And we saw that on the Washington Post when they fired their final woman of color on the editorial board. She's gone. They removed someone on MSNBC, the so-called liberal network. And when you look at what they said, their comments were extremely tame. These were not people that were making off-color remarks. These were extremely mild statements about the state of where we are with political violence, and yet they were silenced. So this means that what you all do with content creation, with blogs, with sharing articles that smaller people write, with sharing TikToks, with creating different things, becomes vitally exponentially more important in the months and year and a half ahead. Because corporate media, if you think that was bad, how do you think they're going to cover this upcoming midterm election? Do you think it's going to be fair and balanced? Do you think that for a second they're going to give any favorable or accurate coverage? So not only can we not depend on them for coverage, we are going to have to make up the gap of the stories they are not sharing. So you've all been inducted, and all of your friends and anyone you can gather, creating that content and filling that gap becomes a big part of our homework collectively over the next several months. So that's the first thing I want you to notice, is that if you thought that coverage was slanted and awful, just wait, right? Someone's bringing up the Fox anchor who called for the lethal injection of homeless people. Yes, that actually is a statement that was said. I saw that clip and I thought it was fake at first because it was so awful. Yeah, there's no balance, there's no logic, there's no awareness of, again, hypocrisy. They don't care. There is an agenda. That's what it is. There is an agenda, and we need to be aware of it. And then it's our job to push back and put information out to counterbalance it. Now, good news, most normal people don't watch traditional news. They don't read the paper anymore. We could argue chicken and egg here about, did the paper start to get less trustworthy and that's why the subscriptions fell, or did the subscriptions falling and the revenue falling cause them to take a different model and try to become more sensational to make up those revenue gaps? We could have that discussion. But the good news is that most people get their news and coverage from social media and online coverage and friends and trusted sources. So don't feel like hope is lost here. We have an opportunity to be those trusted sources. All right, we're talking, for those of you just joining us on Political Fixer Live, we're talking about the story of the incident that happened this week. This was our top story that we were not going to cover, but there's a couple of different angles, and specifically what we're talking about is not what happened in the incident itself, but how people responded to it and why. What was the motivation for that, right? So we're going to move into a couple of different things. I love Veronica's statement, I don't do forced sympathy. Kathy McGrath Walcott is saying we still have freedom of speech. This is correct until they take it from us. Yes, absolutely. We don't want to become our opposition. A very fair point by Cassandra. Okay, so let me talk about a couple of other motivations. So I'm going to read, there was a concern that if we don't toe the line, then if we don't pretend like he was a great person or just silence ourselves, then they're going to come after us. There's going to be a crackdown because this is going to be the moment. This is going to be the moment that they say they're coming after leftists and they're going to do everything. So I'm going to quote a couple of things from Stephen Miller, the, Voldemort Soulless advisor to 47. These are real things that Stephen Miller said. He raged during an appearance on Fox News about a bloody killing field, that there's a public safety crisis. He called the Democratic Party, quote, a domestic extremist organization. And he said that there was lawlessness in the streets, that they would need to deploy people to make sure to crack down on this type of behavior. He went on and on talking about how there are murders. They've turned the streets into a bloody killing field. Anyone with common sense knows that crime is out of control. Okay, so those are actual Stephen Miller quotes. Here's the twist. Those are actual Stephen Miller quotes from when the Doge kid got beat up. Do you guys remember that? Feels like 5 years ago. It was right before we went on hiatus. The Doge kid got the snot beat out of him by, it turned out, a couple of teenagers. But at the time, the legend was that he was stopping all of these woke individuals from attacking a woman. And they came in and the kid got beat up and there was photos and the White House was outraged. And they said, this is the reason. This is the reason that we're going to crack down on things. Guys, he's doing it again. Stephen Miller just wants to be the guy that he's read about in the 1940s history novels. He has glamorized how to dehumanize, attack, control, and just basically be a jerk to his fellow American citizens that disagree with him. He has had this plan. He was born with this plan hardwired in him. If you see footage of him as a teenager on a school bus, he is still being a jackass. That is Stephen Miller. There is no event that makes Stephen Miller more Stephen Miller. There's nothing we can do to placate his bloodthirsty desires. He's going to use any opportunity to say, That's our excuse. That's why we're going to beat up on them. That is why we're going to detain them. That is why we're going to start limiting people's rights. That is why we're going to start shutting down voices that don't agree with us. They don't need a reason to behave this way. They're going to execute plans that treat us like garbage as long as we allow them to do so. This incident was shocking. It was horrifying on a number of levels. And that's all I'll say about that for now. But it's not the cause of anything. And again, those Stephen Miller quotes that I wrote out, we had the same type of "we're going to get you this time" energy the last time something like this happened to one of their own. Okay, so there's a myth that this is it. This is going to be the thing that makes the dam break. They do not possibly have the ability to control all of us. They're trying. They're going to keep pushing. They're going to keep working hard at it. And it's our job to keep pushing back. But if you want to know how weak they are, when they tried to go into Chicago, Governor Pritzker was like, "No, you're not." And they're like, "Okay, maybe we won't." They cannot control every city simultaneously. There are not enough troops to silence 300 million of us. It can't be done. All they have is saber rattling. That's all they have right now. So I just wanted to put that into perspective because there was a lot of people that are like, "Oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Is this going to make it even worse for all of us? Is this going to be the Reichstag fire, which we talked about on the last show?" No, they're just going to continue to say stuff. And if you do not believe me, have I got some quotes for you? All right. And then I want to get your thoughts. But again, let's keep it PG. If you think that this is the thing that is going to change this administration to where it goes to from evil level 9 to evil level 10, a reporter asked 47, this is a quote. He said, "Mr. President," and this was 4 days ago. Okay, so this was fairly new. He said, "Mr. President, my condolences to you, sir. My condolences on the loss of your friend, Charlie Kirk. How are you holding up over the last day and a half, sir?" And this was 47's response. "I think very good. By the way, right there, you see all these trucks? They just started construction of the new ballroom for the White House. It's something they've been trying to get, for about 150 years, and it's going to be a beauty. Absolutely magnificent construction. We just started, so it'll get done very nicely, and it'll be one of the best in the world, actually." Oh yeah, he's heartbroken. He'll never recover. He ordered a vigil at the Kennedy Center because he's now in charge of the Kennedy Center because of whatever reason. And he didn't show up. He went golfing. So for those of you who are worried that this is going to take evil 47 from a 9 to a 10, nope. Just like anyone in the path or the circle of a narcissistic psychopath, they use you until they don't need you anymore, and then they move on. He was used. He was paid well. He said some horrible things. He bears responsibility for his words and the life and the memories that he did create, but he was used for 47's reelection to mobilize these young men. And then his passing was used as a distraction. We don't know what happened, but we know one important thing was his final wish. One of his final public statements of things he would like to see from this administration, particularly the Department of Justice, Charlie Kirk called for the release of the Epstein files. He said very publicly that he believed that there was a difference in someone being cautious and a cover-up. And he believed that the only way that this party could move forward in the future was to release the Epstein files. That happened in mid-July. And in mid-July, Laura Loomer, and man, is this just a roach that has stuck around. I've been dealing with this batty woman since Parkland. Laura Loomer posted and has since deleted, "I don't ever want to hear Charlie Kirk claim he is pro-Trump ever again. After this weekend, I'd say he has revealed himself as a political opportunist. blah, blah, blah. Lately, Charlie has decided to behave like a charlatan. He claims to be pro-Trump one day and stabs him in the back the next. I'm not making any suppositions as far as cause, motive, anything with the incident. What I'm saying is that he spoke out and said, release the Epstein files. This is something that is not going anywhere. How do I know it's not going anywhere? Because today, conservative Republican Senator Kennedy said today, and I'm going to read his quote because I almost fell out of my chair. I had to watch the video twice. Conservative Senator Kennedy said, this issue, the Epstein issue, is not going away. And I think the central question for the American people is that they know that Epstein trafficked young women. They want to know who, if anyone else, he trafficked these young women to. You, the Department of Justice and the FBI, is who he was talking to, are going to have to do more. I'm not saying anything about motive. I'm saying opportunity. Right now, 47 had an opportunity to use this as a distraction away from something that is continuing to come after him. These other issues that we've talked about, they are real. The detention and torture of citizens on our soil, as well as immigrants just here doing their jobs. The ripping away of our American rights and freedoms, including people attacking women as second-class citizens, the LGBTQ community under consistent attack, the Black and brown communities being legally treated as second-class citizens, whether it's by their detention or their removal from their job positions or their silencing of their voices in their careers. The list goes on and on and on. These are real issues, but we're not going to win them with this administration. We're not going to convince them that they're wrong. There's not going to be this after school special music that plays and they say, oh, wow, I've been a horrible person this entire time. No, they're horrible people. And the way that we move past this is we get them out of office and we diminish their power. And so to do that, we have to look at what weakens them. What weakens them is us standing up and speaking out with the truth and not bending the knee. What weakens them is, yes, voting. I know we're not going to vote our way out of this, but we have to get ready for midterms and other elections and vote every single person that is MAGA out of every single office. And then the other thing that weakens them is this scandal. There is nothing else that has made 47 quake in his boots like the Epstein scandal. He has been sloppy in his lies. He has backpedaled. They ended the session of Congress early last year to not deal with it. And here it is again staring in their face. So what can you do when we are talking about all of this? If someone is talking to you fondly about the memory of the young man who was just taken from this earth, then you can ask them a few questions. The first thing you can ask them is, in order to prevent future violence, does this mean you are now in favor of sensible gun control and increasing access to mental health care across the country? If they say no, there's an opportunity to just shut down the conversation right there. If you're upset by this, what are you going to do about it? Forget who did it and the why and the speculation and the conspiracy theories. What are we going to do to prevent it from happening again? Is one way that you can shift the conversation. If they want to talk about him specifically and not about how to prevent it in the future, ask them point blank. Does this mean they support honoring some of his final wishes of releasing the Epstein files? And will they join our call to leadership to do so? That's one way to change the conversation right there. When someone is posting all of this stuff about conspiracy theories and their theories on leftists and all this other stuff on what may have happened, then push back and say, are you aware that right before this happened, he had called for the release of the Epstein files? Put that out there in the ether. If you are someone that wants to engage in that level, not my cup of tea, but if you want to engage, Epstein. And if 47 is brought up at all with what they're going to do and how they're going to target and what they're going to silence, pivot. Do you mean like the victims of Epstein have been silenced, or are you going to allow them free speech and to talk about the people who harmed them? Pivot to Epstein. That is my counsel to you. It is still important. It is still something that scares them, and it is still vitally important, not just for taking down the men who are in power, who feel like it's okay to treat women this way and girls, but also because of the message it sends globally across the board to all young women and girls as they're watching this story to see if something harmful happens to them, do they matter? Do young women matter? Right? Pivot it back. This was a distraction for him. He went on and played golf. He went on and talked about his big, beautiful ballroom. This was a distraction. He used this young man yet again. That's what he does. He sucks the core out of any individual near to him and then just spits them out when he is done. One other quick thing I want to say. This is going to sound like a negative story, and then I'm going to get some of your feedback. Wow, we're at 77,000 likes. That's amazing. We're going to wrap up here soon, I promise. But there was a lot to talk about coming back from hiatus on Political Fixer Live. They're going to continue to push the envelope, but I want to tell you there's weakness there. I don't want you to leave here discouraged, right? I don't want you to think, oh my gosh, they've got all the power. They're going to just keep doing things and we're going to have to take it. No, there were some depressing things that we saw across the board this week. But when they push too hard and we push back, they fail. Let me give you one other final example that I'm going to get some of your audience opinions here. When all of this was going on quietly, there was a measure that was introduced by a GOP lawmaker in Congress that would allow the Secretary of State to revoke U.S. citizen passports if they provided any anti-American views. Those anti-American views were not defined, of course, but we can surmise what they would be. So in plain English, it means that there was a measure that was introduced into Congress this week that said that Marco Rubio or whoever was in his position, the Secretary of State, could arbitrarily take our passports if they disagreed with how we showed our love of country or if they thought that we had anti-American views. That's where we're going. Attempts to silence us. But guess what? Very quick pushback. Very quick pushback. And this thing was withdrawn within a week. You guys probably didn't even know about it yet because it hadn't even gotten out of its infant stages as a bill. And with pushback, then it was silenced and tabled, right? So this is the kind of thing that, yeah, they're going to keep pushing, but that's where we all come in, right? We are so far standing up to them pretty nicely. There's a lot of work to do. They're breaking a lot of stuff, right? Bluefish says that you knew about Bluefish Red Pond. Love that. Knew about the measure, didn't know it was tabled. That was brand new. I'm happy to bring that to you, Bluefish. Actually, I think that happened just this afternoon. Aunt Molly wants to know who pushed back. There were already calls to the congressperson's office, and actually the press was starting to report on the measure. And so by the press, and honestly, I got to say, it was mostly foreign press. The BBC, The Guardian, and other foreign press was starting to actually ask about this measure. And as it was starting to get more daylight, they were just starting to see, oh, they're paying attention. We can't get away with this. So this didn't even require a big uproar. This was just, hey, we're keeping our eyes on you. And that was enough to make him skulk back into his corner, right? And hi to Indiana for Bluefish. So yeah, there's a lot. This is going to be deeper than just 47. I agree with you, Overlander. This is not just him. He is the embodiment of who's there. But never forget, he's just an orange puppet with other wealthier, more powerful men that have information on him pulling those strings. We all know that. But for now, he is the charismatic. We don't have to agree with it, but he is the charismatic figurehead that MAGA is following. And so weakening him still matters. Also, we need to point out that essentially, technically, he's a lame duck. And so moving forward, his last big act that he really can do of any consequence as it stands now is to try to get MAGA to maintain control of both the House and the Senate. That's the biggest thing that he can do in his final term right now. And so holding these senators and these House members accountable for their fealty to him, their loyalty to him, the decisions they've made to slash our healthcare and raise our debt with passing on taxes to billionaires, passing on tax cuts to billionaires, and, you know, not stopping this tariff nonsense when they could have, and allowing the ICE rampant harassment and worse to run wild. All of these decisions, they can still be held accountable for. All right. Over 400 people are up for re-election again in this next cycle. We can make them pay for it. Whew, so much to do. All right, let's end on a positive note. I have missed you guys these last few weeks. I have a question for you. Are you happy to be back? Hopefully this broadcast was not too negative for you. I know we had some tough ground to cover. Do you feel like you picked up anything new, any new perspectives, any new thoughts, any takeaways that are going to make you go away and say, hey, this was time that was well spent? I see that we're at 87,000 likes. Utah has stopped the gerrymandering. Punky, I hadn't seen that. So happy that you reported that. Thank you so much. Doughboy pointing out that Dems need a backbone first. I agree. I think we're seeing some of that. I actually am going to work on a way to talk about what is going on in the Democratic Party. We're going to be talking about that over the next few weeks because it's interesting. To use a football analogy, which, you know, I'm a Texas football girl, we've got a lot of good players on the field, but no great coaches and definitely not great people calling the plays from the booth. So lots of problems here. And Jackie, it's good to be back. So happy to see you. So many people out there giving gifts and things. I want to thank our audience members that share their love and their gifts. I know that Sarah and J Robot have been tracking stuff. We've got Denise, let's see, Denise Leclerc, Jesse, Jenny Gallardo, 33 Ellie, and Vivian. I want to add their name to people that are gifters and other people. We're up to 72 in the fan club. Again, I don't really understand that on TikTok, but I love you guys. Thank you so much. We made it up to 90,000 likes on our first show back, and we're just getting started. We've got tons of content, tons of movement stuff that you all get to participate in. We're going to give you some updates on some of the things that we've already launched that you guys have been supportive of behind the scenes. That's going to be on next week's show. Next week at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Tuesdays at 9, then we're going to be continuing our Political Fixer Live. And we're going to start this fall coming to some communities near you. So you could actually be in the audience and participate in events on some of our Political Fixer Live shows. So we're excited to start talking more about that in the weeks ahead. We're also going to be providing more tools for those of you getting excited to get involved in campaigns, activism, organizing in your communities. If you're thinking about running for office, that's going to be a big priority. And of course, we're going to be amplifying some of your voices as well. This Political Fixer team definitely needs you. So whether you are a casual poster and someone that joins us in this environment in which we welcome you, we're so happy you're here, or you're somebody that's growing your own online community, let us know. We want to continue to help grow your mission and your value and your visibility online. So Cynthia's asking, the new TikTok rules, will they ban the Political Fixer? I mean, maybe, but we've still got other ways to reach out. Right now, we're not going to be worried about that. We're just going to keep on keeping on. And the good news is that while we're here, it seems to be making an impact, because I definitely, even in all of my healing, got a lot of energy from spending some time with you all this evening. And I hope you got some energy from it as well. I really missed you guys while in recovery, and I'm so happy to be here. Hi to Jolie as well. Good to meet you. Thank you for being here. Tetra, I'm seeing that. Jacob King, so many new faces and friends. I hope that I see many of you again here next week. Divine AF Girl, we will definitely be back next week. Love to you as well, Marlene. So excited to bring more stories and sanity in this crazy world to all of you. In the meantime, I need you to take care of yourselves and each other. Stay focused, stay calm, stay positive. Let's keep doing the work, keep organizing, but take care of yourselves. You have to care for the caregivers, everyone. I know this more than anyone right now. So happy, and thank you so much for the well wishes. I'm Shauna Presley Vircher on behalf of my family and my team, specifically Sarah and J Robot, who made this whole thing happen, as well as so many of you that keep things going. Then I am excited to be back. I thank you so much for inviting me into your home and your devices. And we will see you next Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern on Political Fixer Live. Yay. Oh, I'm seeing so many new faces. Not on Earth, 100,000 likes. Woohoo! You guys crushed it. Look at Who's Your Mama, Susan Fern. Oh, man, that's amazing. Thank you for the warm welcome back, guys. Oh, I'm so happy. Talk to you all soon. Bye, everybody. Okay, we're back.
Great job. It was 102,000.1 likes and 4,900 viewers.
Wow.
I figured out something on the lights
Uh-huh.
before. I figured out you could hit the L key over and over.
Uh-huh.
Now I just figured out you can just hold it down.
Oh. Okay, well that's good for your digital preservation.
Wait, what was that, Jason? I missed that.
Like you know, you have the little heart in the corner for the light. You don't have to like click it. You can just the L key does it.
Okay.
But I thought you had to keep pressing it. No, you can just hold down the L key.
Did you notice that we can't kick out people?
I didn't know. I saw a couple people.
It wasn't too bad though, but
No,
you know.
a couple people made comments, but they weren't like following it up with anything. They were just
Yeah.
They just made a comments like, all right, well, you know, they weren't engaging. So, but so I didn't try to kick anybody out.
I'm surprised it didn't get worse with bringing up the Charlie Kirk thing, but everybody kept it PG, which was good.
Yeah.
I tried to give it a different take rather than, but I did like drip the conspiracy theory out there.
Wait a second. Are you? Oh, you're. Oh wait, Shauna.
Mhm.
Wait, Shauna.
Yeah.
You're still on the YouTube live.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
How? Literally how?